This is Bob Weisel. I am interviewing Albert LeCrenier at 128 Clearfield Road in Wethersfield, Connecticut. Today is 12/13/2010. Albert is a Army Air Corps veteran who flew B-24s in the Pacific. And we will now begin. Why don't we start by you just telling me how you ended up going in the service, and were you drafted, or you told me you enlisted?
Well, as the war raged in Europe, I was attending prep school, Mount Hermon Prep School in Western Massachusetts, and things are kind of hectic. At my senior year, I lost my dad. The draft was looming overhead. I was concerned about my mother during the year, but I was told that I had to go back to school and do any chance for proper education to get jobs and so forth. So I finished Mount Hermon in '42, and then I went on to Wesleyan University in Middletown. Entering that, the draft was beginning to take a lot of college people because they were having deferments at that point, and the deferments were running out. I had clear in my mind I did not want to go into infantry, and like most kids, I guess, I was interested in aviation because I made model planes and things of that nature. And then the college advisor, each college had advisors for the various services, told me that if I qualified as an aviation cadet, it was a special program that would give me a year deferment. So I jumped at the chance. Well, he was wrong. I got 6 months deferment and was hauled into service. I guess you would say I registered at Middletown, but I think it was actually in Hartford. We sent us off to Atlantic City for basic training on this cadet program. They had taken over just about all the hotels, stripped them of everything that was strippable, floors and so forth. I ended up in the bridal suite of the Hotel Tremor, which has since been destroyed, and it was pretty cold. But anyway, it was a lot of marching. The beaches were where we conducted calisthenics, and that's the only exposure we had to that vacation resort.
What was the month that you went in?
I was in March, so this would be, well,
43.
Yeah, 43. And I don't remember how long that took, but I presumably got chicken pox. I had some spots on my body, and I don't think it was because I was never sick, but they put me into a sick unit, or whatever they called it, which was a rundown hotel again. And like the service, you're there until you can't be in your unit unless you're active and full. You didn't have convalescent facilities or anything of that nature. So I stood there, it must have been 2 weeks in this place going crazy. I had no material to read or anything like that. When released, I went back to Hotel Tremor to pick up my group and found that they were preparing to leave. And I ran down to the sergeant and found out my name was on the shipping order, so they did not either have me sick or what have you, I don't know, but I just got the tail end of the shipment. Troop trains apparently ran at night, or at least the ones I was on did, and you had to have your shades drawn because of the blackout. So here we left Atlantic City, not knowing where we're going, and lo and behold, when daylight came, I found we were in Springfield, Mass. 40 miles from home. I couldn't have asked for a better arrangement. My wife and my girlfriend at the time was able to greet me when I had open house or open time. The Springfield College was basically a phys ed college. They had a famous exhibition group that we would see now today in the Olympics with parallel bars and rings of that nature. And so they were very much in tune with keeping their cadets in good shape. Fortunately, I had just gotten out of a soccer season at Wesleyan, so I was in pretty good shape and was able to muster enough energy to keep up with people. A lot of people fell by the waysides. So this was physically, it was a elimination contest to some degree as they went along. We did our exercises with 9-pound steel bars and things like that.
When did you get to Springfield College?
That I'm not sure, because I don't remember how long I was in Atlantic City. I'd say April probably, or May. From Springfield, we went to Nashville, Tennessee, which was called the Classification Center. There they gave you a series of mental and physical tests to determine your ability to be a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, or washed out. So it was an awful lot of tension at the time, because you chose whether you wanted to go in single engine for pilots or twin engine. I chose twin engine, thinking B-38, because I kind of like the idea of an extra engine. So after Nashville, we were assigned to Maxwell Field, Alabama, which was the heart of the aviation cadet program. This was a permanent Army base and had been used for years and still very much in use. The cadet program was patterned after the West Point. Square meals, a lot of rigorous requirements to meet, foolish ones, and as I looked at it, but not the duration of West Point, which I think is about a year. A lot of marching, a lot of every night we had a retreat parade, which meant all very formal presentation, and a lot of inspections for your personnel and equipment, and if you missed up on an unbuttoned pocket or something like that, you could end up doing tours, which is walking in Class A uniform with a rifle in a parking lot back and forth for however many hours or trips you had assigned. The graduating from Maxwell, we then began flight training. Prior to that, there was no flight training.
You were still a cadet at this
Still
time?
cadet. This is all in the cadet program. And I went to Avon Park, Florida. And that was called the primary training. We had PT-17 Stearman airplane, which is a canvas-covered airplane, very narrow landing gear, which made it difficult not to ground loop sometimes, which would mean you were washed out, so that was always over your head. It was a handy place to learn to control airplanes in turns and so forth, because we could use the very geometric rows of orange trees and so forth to have start your figure eights and things of that nature.
How many hours did you fly that?
I think it was about 30 hours. After that, we went to basic flying school, which in my case was Cochran Field outside of Macon, Georgia. That field is now, I think, the Macon Municipal Airport. The airplane that was used there is the BT-13, which was a larger horsepower, all metal, single plane with adjustable props, which did not have in the primary train. After that, went to advanced flying school, and there we used the airplane designated as AT-10, which was twin-engined and had a pilot and co-pilot seat. Graduating there, you received your wings and your commission as a second lieutenant.
And do you recall when that was for you?
Pardon me?
Do you recall what time, when that happened to you? Approximately.
May of 42, 43.
Okay.
And after, since I asked for multi-engine designation, I was picked to go to Maxwell Field again, but this time for first pilot training on the B-24 aircraft.
Oh boy.
4-engine Liberator bomber. And there we trained as on cross-country flying and single engine to the extent that you could. We actually, the instructor actually cut the third engine as we were landing one time just to show that it could control it with one engine. It was, I wouldn't want to do it myself. Graduating there, went on to Lemoore, California, which was a crew assembling area, and there I picked up my crew from all over. Some came from this. I was in the Southeast Training Command. Some came from the Texas area, so it was a representative of the country, as it turned out. And as a crew, this was a short trip. As a crew, we went to Muroc, California for combat crew training. There we flew as a crew, of course, learned one another's pluses and minuses. Went through gunnery practice for the gunners, bombing practice for the bombardier, navigation trips for the navigator, formation flying, and everything that would normally need for combat flying. Interesting little sidelight, my tail gunner came from California and rode dirt bikes all over California, and was constantly getting sick in the airplane, and this was not too happy. The rest of the crew was not too happy about this. So I took him to the flight surgeon and told him the problem and see what the story could be was. He says in his mind, motion sickness is motion sickness. And if you can ride a bike, you can fly in an airplane. Of course, he's at the end of the plane, flying backwards, a long way from the center of gravity, so he got a lot of motion. But the flight surgeon must have been right, because he didn't get sick after that.
What was his name? Do you recall?
Yes, Rusty Conrado, C-O-N-R-A-D-O.
Okay.
And the funniest thing, he's the last one on my crew, or almost the last one on my crew that there is.
Really?
Still getting together once in a while. Combat crew training, went to Mather Field in California for our overseas trip to somewhere. We were given a new plane and had to have enough number of flights for shakedown purposes. Spent, I think, a good day or more calibrating a compass, flying a prescribed course in the desert, and took a lot of time in an instrument they had, or a calculator, because we were taking a lot of equipment with us, and it had to be properly stored weight-wise to balance the airplane. And this was a function that we never did before, but this was a one-shot deal. We took the flight. Oh, I should say an interesting part of that flight was we went into a cloud cover approaching Hawaii, and I didn't want to go through the clouds, let down through the clouds if I had another alternative. So I sought out a light piece of cloud and a little gap in the clouds and kind of dove the plane as much as you could, a 4-engine plane, and pulled out on top of a Navy cruiser. We were hoping our IFF was on and that no one had itchy fingers on the cruiser, but gave us some consternation for a while there. they took the plane away from us, of course, in Hawaii. And, well, what I should say, we went from Hawaii to Kauai, which is a northernmost island. That place, airfield was named Barking Sands. We never heard the sands bark, but that's the name. And spent 2 months there, which was longer than we wanted to, but it was awaiting assignment for our next flight. The Air Transport Command flew us, since we left our plane in Hawaii, flew us to our destination, which was the island called Angar, A-N-G-U-A-R, which was part of the Palau Island group, that's where we were assigned to the 7th Air Force, 494th Bomb Group, 864th Squadron. Our function there was to bomb locally the largest island in the Palau group, in the Palau Island chain, was called Babel Thuop. And this was a large island and allegedly had 40,000 Japanese troops trapped there. And we were to keep them from spreading. Mainly we're bombing anti-aircraft positions. But an interesting thing about Babel Thuop is that there is the airstrip had a large sign on it, the letters "Welcome." And people, one of our later group that joined us almost landed there thinking that was the right place to land. So that picture, there was a picture of that in some magazine or maybe made the papers, I don't remember. But anyway, we after that we were assigned to go up to Okinawa, and we did this by boat. There were only so many airplanes. The older crews flew. We went by boat, and on the way up we stopped at a atoll. Actually, it's a combination of small islands in the form of a sea, and it's called Ulithi. And it turns out this was a secret Navy mustering place where they could assemble convoys and have them protected. All they had to do was protect the one entrance. Then from there on we went up to Okinawa, and were assigned to the airfield at Yantan. It's called Kadena Airfield, and flew missions against the southern Japan island of Kyushu. That's as far as we could reach.
How many miles would that be? Or hours in the air?
It was about an 8-hour trip, all told, so about 4.5 hours, I guess. We flew early missions, mainly to industrial targets, airfields, manufacturing groups, and things of that nature. But one interesting flight we made was to bomb a battleship called Hiruna. Early in the war, to jazz up people's interest in the war and get their support, the government, not too truthful, made a big deal about a Navy pilot named Colin Kelly who put a bomb down the smokestack of the battleship Karuna and sank it. We found out that that was not so. So we were trying to sink it many years later, and I don't know that we did. We were in our missions, we were told to stay away from 3 targets: Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and USA, USA. I don't know that this story is true. Probably it isn't. But the first two received the atomic bomb, and the third one, USA, we were told was Japanese named the town that so they could say products they built were made in USA, and that I think could be accurate.
Yeah. Did they give you a reason why you were to avoid those?
No. And I'm not sure that's true anymore, because I heard something recently where Nagasaki was an alternate target from what was planned. And if that's true, then they didn't. Keeping away from those 3 points would be their primary target. So I think that's stories get twisted and as they're told. The biggest problem we had was water, long distances over water, and sharks. We didn't have much anti-aircraft fire because there weren't islands or land masses to support it. So we had to fly water. There were a number of B-17s that had large rescue boats under their belly, tucked under the belly, and they circled a particular geographic area and were on call if we ever went down into the ocean. And that, to me, is about the only time I've seen the B-17 used in the Pacific, because they did not have the range or the bomb capacity or the able to fly as far as the 24.
When you were at Okinawa, was this after the U.S. invasion of Okinawa?
Oh yes,
Yeah, okay.
It was still going on in the southern tip, but Okinawa invasion, as you know, had a lot of kamikaze activity, and we missed all of that, fortunately. Yeah. Things are fairly crude at the time, but no combat problems. While on Okinawa, the war ended, and of course the ships in the harbor celebrated by shooting off everything they had, and a piece of shrapnel went through my tent, and that's the closest thing I came to being wounded. I guess about a month after the war ended, we were taken up to Japan. Again, C-46 flew us up, as it turned out in this case. And the first field we landed on in the island of Kyushu was, I think, the southernmost airstrip that Japan had, and it was a kamikaze field, we were told. And we could see some of the planes, and you could see where they were a one-way trip. They actually had wing tanks made out of wood, so they had no intention of coming back. That takes another mentality that I can't even comprehend. I ended up being stationed in the place called Tachikawa, which is south of Tokyo, and it was considered the right field of Japan. Everything they had there, though, was interesting. They had a lot of equipment, but it looked like our own equipment, bulldozers and things like that, but everything was in miniature. And that fact kind of stood out for whatever reason. We basically were preparing our equipment. I was assigned to an auto repair shop just to keep me busy. And we were basically just preparing that equipment to be returned to the United States, kind of wasting time. I had a different experience while there to get my flight time in. I was asked to join a pilot of the B-25 aircraft, which we did, and he had me go through single engine procedures and a few things like that, which I did well apparently, because I was used to 4 engines, and with 2 there wasn't much of a problem. So we were landing, And it had been a lot of rain that day, and we overshot the runway and went through a large navigation ditch, sheared off our gear and threw it in front of our plane. I went to pick up my hat, and the engineer went right through past me. He had been through this before. He said, "Don't stop for anything." But I did. I was not involved with the cause of the accident, so I looked differently, but I had no problem other than a story to tell. One thing in Tachikawa, they put us up in a hangar. Because I was an officer, they put us in the office of the hangar office, which is within the building. And the only thing I can say about it for comfort was that it wasn't very comfortable. It was cold, but we had a beautiful view of Mount Fujiyama, which is an extremely symmetrical mountain, and I had full view of it. You were returned home depending on how many points you acquired. Age, marital status, children, and so forth all added the points. I was able to get enough points at that time to be sent home, and I did so by ship. Landed in Seattle, Washington. The long look-forward phone call home was permitted, and we came back east by train. It was the winter of '46, and we got stuck in the snow. The mountains snow was so heavy, and that delayed us, I think, a matter of half a day. Finally ended up at Fort Devens, Mass. Was discharged there. I was promoted to first lieutenant on Okinawa, and I went back in the reserve after discharge, and I was discharged from the reserve as a captain. I spent almost exactly 3 years in the service. Returned to Westland after that via the GI Bill, fortunately. Married the girl that came up to Springfield to see me. At the end of my junior year, we lived with a professor. I joined the Aetna in the group department, and that's the end of my story.
All right. Let me ask you a few questions.
Honey, what the rocking was making me motion sick.
Tell me about the B-24.
B-24, four-engine bomber, clearly identified by a large twin tail. It was developed to replace or to supplement the B-17. They needed a plane that was faster and could carry a larger bomb load, and especially in the Pacific. The 17 could not muster that. So the Ford was built by, 24 was built in Consolidated Veltri in California. I think each engine is 1250 horsepower. It was all hydraulic except for the control surfaces, which were wire. The first time that's happened, the B-17 was all electric. It was not a pretty plane compared with the 17 perhaps, and it would not belly land very well because it was a high airplane. But it had a very efficient wing called the Davis airfoil, which permitted it to fly higher and faster and longer distance than the 17. I'm told in Europe they could not put the two together, the 17 and the 24, because they couldn't keep up with one another. So it had to be flown in separate groupings. It was made, Henry Ford said, "I can make that plane just like I make cars." And everyone said, "No way." But he showed that they could. Assembly coming together in a regular assembly line. I think they ended up there making one a day at the end of the war. More 24s were made than any other airplane, something like 18,000. They were made by Ford, Consolidated, and another company I can't think of. There's three companies manufacturing them.
How many hours did you have as a pilot?
I can't remember, probably 200 maybe.
Did you, when you first got to Okinawa, which was the first place where you were flying in combat, is that correct?
No, Agar.
Oh yeah, when you first got there, did you fly as a pilot or did you fly as a co-pilot?
No, I flew pilot all the time.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. They called us airplane commanders
Okay.
to contrast the co-pilot.
How many, do you know approximately how many missions you flew?
Yeah, 10.
Any close calls?
No.
They're the best kind. Yeah.
A plane went down.
In training, I lost an engine on a navigation flight. That was not a close call, but
How, a little bit of the life on Okinawa, was it, what kind of food did you have?
Yeah. we, of course, it always pays to be an officer, as you probably know, in the service. So we had individual tents, but they were just on a platform. They were square tents. So we would get a bottle of booze, go down to ships unloading at the harbor, and grab one that had lumber on it. Try to talk the driver into dropping a few pieces of plywood off on the way, and got enough wood to make sidings and so forth on our tent, so we had quite a comfortable lodging, as it turned out. The Yantan was on a plateau, I'd say 100 feet over the water, and actually planes would take off from the airstrip, and it didn't have enough power, it could actually dip down as you were take off on a carrier to gain speed and fly. So we were on terraces from that plateau down, our bomb group. Our dining hall, for instance, the mess hall, was a step lower than our housing. My particular house was, our tent was in a low area, so I found I could get access to a small bulldozer that was carried in an airborne plane, and used it to push the dirt around and redirect the water. So we had good facilities. The mess hall, we ate basically C rations. K rations were the little boxes that infantry had. C rations we were prepared by a cook or so. And of course Spam comes out your ears. Not bad overall.
Did you ever get any entertainers coming through? Or?
Yeah, we'd walk halfway through the island to see USO troops, Bob Hope and
You saw Bob Hope?
and Colombo and that whole tribe. They were well worth the walk, no matter how far you had to go. We had movies. We had a little pickup basketball, if that was your interest. Little softball. Not much beyond that.
Any pranks? It must have been some silliness going on.
The silly part, I guess, was I didn't drink or smoke when I got into the service. And along that same line, because I didn't drink, I was very popular in my squadron, because you got beer chits or root beer chits. And I didn't drink beer, so my beer chits were worth about 5 root beers. The favorable exchange rate, which I enjoyed because I love root beer. No, I didn't. I can't think of any pranks.
Do you remember where you were when you found out that it was VJ Day?
Well, I was on Okinawa, and ship erupted with all the celebration, we knew something was going on, and then we were told the purpose, the reason for that. That was a happy time, needless to say.
I guess. Did you ever think about flying after you left the service?
I did. My wife had other thoughts. Of course, I'd only gotten one semester of school in, and I wanted to get back. But four-engine pilots were being hounded to some degree by the airlines to go in that direction. And I was asked, but I wasn't interested. So, no, on our honeymoon, I wanted to go up in the float plane, pontoon plane. I didn't go because she didn't want me to go. But I have snuck a few single engine rides here and there in Piper Cubs.
So you said you went back on the GI Bill.
Yes.
To Wesleyan.
Yes, and probably would not have been able to. You know, my dad had died, and my mother was all alone. I have a sister, but she was married at the time, and I had funds to start, and the GI Bill made it possible for me to finish.
All right. Well, is there any funny story, anything you'd like to add to?
No,
The crew getting stuck with the A-bomb.
The what?
Your crew that went down and.
Oh, well, one of our missions, I think it was the one that went against the battleship Hiruna, was shot down, and captured, or some of them were captured. We learned later that I guess pretty much the whole one was killed, and the rest were captured, and they were held at Hiroshima. And the pilot was taken from the crew and taken to Tokyo for interrogation. And while that was taking place, they dropped a bomb on Hiroshima. So the rest of the crew that were stranded in Hiroshima were lost because of that. The pilot, who happened to be in my squadron, after the war, was in constant contact with somebody interested in that episode. And make a long story short, a village near Hiroshima, apparently, that was involved with some of these crewmen, was in contact with the pilot, and they formed quite a friendship and would visit one another over the years. Sort of like the German POW and the prisoner of war episodes. That was, and he wrote a book about it, but
That was a lucky break.
Hmm?
It was a lucky break.
yes, it was. Yeah, yeah. You know, location, is so important.
Oh, you left the Air Corps in '46, but you stayed active in veterans organizations.
Oh, not really. I joined the American Legion for a while, but that didn't interest me really. And I was in the reserve for a while, and there again, I didn't get to the point where I was taking vacations under the reserve. It was I don't remember what the reserve unit was called, but it wasn't that type. And I didn't want to get that involved where I would have to spend a weekend, a month away from my family and so forth. So I dropped out of the reserve. And beyond that, I have not been involved.
But you occasionally go to reunions?
Yeah, our bomb group was the last B-24 bomb group organized. And they had reunions every other year for a while. I was working young family and didn't go to the first one and never felt I could afford it. But after a while, pressure from my wife, we became interested and did start to attend them. And then because we're all getting older and fewer of us, we have annual reunions instead of every 2 years. And the last reunion, it was almost ridiculous. We had 17 veterans in the group, and they're claiming they're going to have one more before it's over. And that's been fun because two pilots that were close to me always went. At one point I had the largest number of crew members able to attend, which was 4. And some crews have lost all their members. And now I have, there's only 2 of us in my crew left, my top gunner and myself.
What were the names of your crew members?
J.D. Owens, O-W-E-N-S, was the co-pilot. Paul Stutz, S-T-U-T-Z, was a navigator. Yeah, what's his name? Burner. Phil Binen, B-I-N-E-N, was the bombardier. Yeah, a bombardier. Rusty Conrado was my tail gunner. Stu Dawson was my ball turret. Joe Kaepernick was my radio operator. Don Bonkowski was my nose turret. Bart Hammonds, H-A-M-M-O-N-S, was my top turret. And Keith Knuckles was my engineer. Oh, did I say Joe Kaepernick?
Yep.
He was radio operator. I don't want to. Did I say that?
Yep.
Okay.
And what was the last one again? The
Knuckles, N-U-C-K-O-L-S, Keith. That was my engineer. And they're all gone except Hammonds and myself.
and the pilots that you were friendly with?
Phil Leithhead. And Crawford McDonough.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I thank you for your time and effort.
I forgot to mention.
Thank you for your service.
Well, it's not that. After the war, when I was flying out of Yantian, Okinawa, a number of cargo planes of the service were bringing our own prisoners of war from Japan home. They were dropping them off in Okinawa, and for some reason that doesn't make any sense, we had to carry them from there, Okinawa, to the Philippines. And we are not a transport ship plane. So what they did was they actually put wooden seats in the bomb bay. The bomb bay of a 24 is like a warehouse. It's noisy, it's cold, there's no windows. I can't imagine a less comfortable arrangement, but maybe to the POW that was heaven. Anyway, we took them from Okinawa to the Philippines, made a few trips there. Clark Field, which is now inundated with a erupting volcano, no longer in existence. I took other flights to Nichols Field, which is outside of Manila. And I'm not sure why, except to bring high-level personnel back and forth type thing. It was a shuttle service, I guess you'd call it. The thing is, we did lose a few planes in the process because there was always seemed to be a lot of weather between Okinawa and the Philippines. But I didn't have any of that problem, fortunately.
Okay.